Let's talk about Chapter 9 of The Great Gatsby.
It takes place before and during Gatsby's funeral, right after Mr. Wilson shoots him.
The main event in Chapter 9 is Gatsby's funeral, and it isn't very major at all. The lack of attendance at the funeral goes to show that Gatsby ultimately failed in his goal to attain what he desired, Daisy, or who. The lack in attendance also showed that all the people at his parties every week weren't really friends, and the friends that he did really make were only in the process of trying to achieve his goal of winning over Daisy, which he failed.
This chapter to reflect on his experiences in New York. He says, "I see that this has been a story of the West. After all, Tom and Gatsby, Daisy and Jordan, and I were all Westerners, and perhaps we possessed some deficiency in common, which made us subtly unadaptable to Eastern life." This shows that Nick sees America as a place of many diverse cultures and values. He remarks that most of the characters in the book, since they are from the West, weren't ready for the lack of moral present in the East. I wanted to get somebody for him. I wanted to go into the room where he lay and reassure him, "I'll get someone for you, Gatsby." This quote perfectly describes Nick's emotions in the chapter. Nick doesn't want Gatsby to be alone at his funeral, and Nick decides to get as many of Gatsby's friends to come, but to no avail.
In the chapter, Henry Gatz is depicted as a solemn old man, very helpless and dismayed, bundled up in a long, cheap ulster against a warm September day. From this description, we learn quite a few things about Henry Gatz. We learn that he obviously was affected by his son's death, and that he appears poor. These things show that Henry still cared for Gatsby, even though he appears to have received no financial aid from him from the poor Ulster. This can also be reflected back on Gatsby, as his father talks highly of him. Henry says, quote, "He had a big future before him, you know. If he'd have lived, he'd have been a great man, like James J. Hill."
He's in the right because he feels as if Gatsby had tried to steal his friend Nick and his wife Daisy. Nick goes on to this about Tom and Daisy, saying, "They were careless people, Tom and Daisy. They smashed up things and creatures and then retreated back into their money or their vast carelessness." Nick feels as if Tom and Daisy ruined their relationship with him and the relationship with Gatsby. And all they would do is throw money at their problems to help them get out of it. And that's why they left New York right after Gatsby opened up about loving Daisy.
The situation with Meyer Wolfensheim is one of the few times we see Nick get frustrated, because anytime Nick tries to set up a meeting with him, the secretary would conveniently say, "There's no one here," or "Nobody's in." But when Nick finally gets a meeting with Wolfensheim, he is told a key component on how Gatsby really received his wealth. Wolfensheim tells Nick, "Start him, I made him, I raised him out of nothing, right out of the gutter." Wolfensheim reveals that he was the one who made Gatsby wealthy, and that is why Gatsby had to do business with Wolfensheim's shady world.
Daisy was very quick to move on, but not after Gatsby's death. She moved on after Nick broke up with her. Nick recalls, "When I had finished, she told me without comment that she was engaged to another man. But after the breakup, Jordan shows that she still had some feelings for Nick, because she says, 'I don't give a damn about you now, but it was a new experience for me, and I felt like a little dizzy for a while.' Jordan saying this after a bunch of meaningless relationship with other men, that after she got with Nick, she actually felt a connection with him and felt the effects of it after Nick broke up with her.
It is interesting that even though he is dead, Gatsby is still mentioned as much as the other main characters. Again, in Nick's conversation with Wolfensheim, it is revealed that Wolfensheim is the sole cause of Gatsby's wealth. Gatsby, like the era of the Roaring Twenties, appears to be perfect from the outside, but in reality isn't as flawless as he seems. Another thing worth noting about Gatsby in Chapter 9 is his personal improvement schedule. This again shows what Gatsby came from and the determination he had in order to better himself and become successful.